First of all, welcome, participants of the summer school and the general audience. It's a privilege for me to welcome you to Tsinghua in Cloud. Tsinghua is a great institution with a solid historical root. Recently, Tsinghua has made rapid growth towards being a leading global university, while contributing to China with its strength in innovation and creativity. As you may have noticed through the preceding lectures, innovation is a frequently used word in China. Innovation is the key to China's economic success. The economy is a boundless topic. What I'm prepared to share with you is a personal perspective. However, I hope it can bring you a glimpse of this marvelous country and its vigorous economy. I'll try to go through by decoding China's economic achievements in a few words, and also interpret the challenges and opportunities, while saying challenges are the opportunities. And also I'll give you a few takeaways as from this lecture. On day one, Professor Xue Lan shared a similar chart in his opening lecture. This demonstrates the growth of China's economy measured by GDP, gross domestic product. If you look at this chart, most people will be amazed how striking it is. Actually, it's going to be out of the chart very soon. This measures the current price of GDP in China in renminbi. If we look at this particular year, 2019, the Chinese GDP is 99 trillion yuan. If we look at the relative growth, the chart we see is nominal price. If we look at the relative growth, it is measured as 8.9% since 1978. Usually, people take 1978 as the start year of the recent economic growth, a miracle of the economic growth. However, if we look back, actually the growth between 1952 to 1977 was as well marvelous, however, not very stable. And given that the foundation was weak, so what we see here is the superior growth after 1978. It's also the year people mark as the opening year of opening up and reform. But if we look at it in a relative way, in 1978, the Chinese GDP was only 2% of the world GDP. Its share now is increased to 18%. So if we consider it relatively, the GDP in China has grown up tenfold relatively to other countries. Okay. Later on, we'll try to go over why we have achieved such a superior growth. Let's take a look at the textile export, for example. In year 2018, the total export of textile and apparel products from China to outside of the country was valued at $276.7 billion US. It took up 35% of the world market share in total exports. Many of the products are manufactured products, including apparels, that people see in the stock market, in the markets, supermarkets, etc., could be traced back from China. There could be a label made in China inside it. This example is an example to show the significance of China, the Chinese manufacturing industry, as being factory of the world. Now look at a more primary industry, the steel. If we look at this chart for 2019, China's production of steel was more than 50% of the world production. And this is the distribution by other countries. It's more interesting to see that China is not only the largest producer, it's also the largest exporter and importer of steel in the world. The international trades were driven by the variety of steel products manufactured in different countries. So China's production is large. It also supports the rest of the world by exporting and importing. The Panama Canal was renovated with an expansion to a new lock. In the first day of the opening of this canal, the first ship is this one, labeled as Costco, which is a Chinese shipping company. Okay. We can see the containers on the ship, which is also acclaimed by the population. Tens of thousands of people celebrated the opening of this expanded canal and also the first ship. Actually, this ship is an example to show that the supply chain that the Chinese companies provide to support the rest of the world and connect different countries of the world. The containers we see from this picture actually really work to reduce the average cost of shipping across the oceans to the minimum. Actually, if we take an example, we look at a bottle of red wine across the ocean shipping. The shipping cost could be reduced to tens of cents, US cents. So this is another example, more visualized. Rujiazui is an area in Pudong district of Shanghai city. We look at this part of the picture. This is Puxi, the west of the river, which is the heart of Shanghai city. This is the east side. It was an expanded but suburban area back in 1990. Another picture, 18 years later, you see from the same vision, the high-rising buildings were already built. This is a new city, which is now the center, financial center of China. And a more recent look, a busy and a modern city. So I hope these pictures give us a visualized understanding of how fast the development of China is, especially the cities. The skyline of the cities are reshaped for a good way. This is another visualized chart which shows the weight of economic growth in Asian countries. If we look at a single country, US is the number one, China is second. Surrounding China, most of the Asian economies grow as fast. So add them together, we see that the Asian economies contribute a large portion to the global economy, especially the growth of the global economy. Of course, many other areas are also rising up and promising. The weight, or we say the engine of economic growth, is in Asia. So let me give you the takeaway number one. First of all, the word economic growth is driven by Asian economies. Second, emerging world leaders are in Asia now. They are either in person or online. In particular, they are in China. Like you guys, these emerging world leaders come from across the world, deep dive in Asia, to understand the micro and the macroeconomic factors that drive this region and understand the people here. This is not a personal opinion only. It is a shared vision and wisdom. Back in 2012, I worked with Mr. Dominic Barton to develop a global leadership course. At that time, Mr. Barton assumed the global helm at McKinsey & Company after a string of career promotions in China and Asia. He joined a team of distinguished leaders of multinational institutions to lecture the students across the university for building global competence and global vision. Leadership has transferable market value. Mr. Barton now is the Canadian ambassador to China after retirement from corporate work. This wisdom is also shared by Mr. Steve Schwarzman, who claims that China is a mandatory course for global leaders. Back in the spring of 2013, I joined the first academic council meeting of the Schwarzman Scholars Program. Together with colleagues and advisors, we developed a curriculum that enables with deep learning of China and the cultivation of Tsinghua value. So I'm very glad that the participants of the summer school have chosen to join this particular school at this particular moment. Now, let's go to some numerical explanations. We have to interpret why or how the GDP growth was realized. We know that GDP is the output of academic activities for a country. So in short, it's on the supply side, and we have the demand side. So who is going to produce this GDP? If we review the Chinese economic success, we find that between 1978 and 2020 now, China is experiencing industrialization in a fast pace, which is offering the supply. Of course, supply needs to be balanced by consumption. For the same time, China is transitioning itself through urbanization. If we look back in 1978, only 18% of the population resided in urban areas who took urban jobs or industrial jobs. Now, this number goes to 60.6%. By simple calculation, we find out that almost 1% of the population of China got urbanized. They either migrated from their countryside homes to urban or cities areas, or the villages were upgraded to be townships or cities. 1% of Chinese population. That's about 10 million people every year, which is bigger than a large number of countries worldwide. So this is a real miracle, a society miracle, economic miracle. And if we look at the economic and the social stability and the development, no words can tell enough. Let's look at GDP per capita. Even though Chinese GDP is large by size, but if we count the population size, it's still in the mean of the countries in the world. We look at, okay, this is China, mainland, Chinese mainland. The GDP per capita is about 10,000 US dollars. And this is a much higher numbers. Okay. So by some calculation, personal calculation, if we consider the GDP per capita between the years, for example, in 1978, the China's GDP per capita was merely $156 at that time. That was about 1/10 of the world average. The US GDP per capita was already high. Of course, there were many reasons why China's GDP per capita was low, because it was not included in the world market. For now, 2019, China's GDP surpassed the mark line, 10,000 US dollars. Okay. If we consider the United States GDP per capita, it's still way high. However, the relative difference is much reduced. Then we look at the world average. It's here. The world, not including US, is here. So China is between the world average and the world average without the US. Put it in another word, China's GDP per capita meets the world average. So this brings to my second observation here. Would have contributed to the success, even though I said the economic growth could be numerically explained by, but what was the fundamental force for such success? Why it was happening in China, not in every single country? So if we look back in 1949, when the new China government was established, the economy was weak. The society was underdeveloped. So the new China government executed, from my understanding, 3 important and strategic moves that have shaped or reshaped our country's framework. The first thing is education. At that time, not only education for the children, but also education for the adults, because a big number of the population were not literate. The government spent efforts and resources to educate every single adult. So literally speaking now, every single person in China, adult, can read and write. They can understand each other from paperwork. So this education empowered the average person in China, not now, but back 50 years in the history. Also, the new government enacted social village cooperatives for the rural areas. Literally speaking, every village was united to work together under one order, to plan and operate. So this movement, with historical costs and other assessments, but one result of this phenomena or this effort is people in the rural villages or labor force were trained, organized, educated to be industrial workers or workers on the farm. Later on, I'm going to show you one interesting example. So this cooperative movement empowered the average organization or the organization capability of Chinese workers, Chinese labor force. At that time, the new government was very strategic in developing full spectrum of industrialization, focusing on the steel production. The government established many different factories or companies to produce all products or basic materials in the industry sector. If you take a closer look, China is among the very few countries which has a full spectrum of industries. That means the country can support itself at a minimum base inside of its economic root. So this full spectrum industrialization enables independence and the sustainability of the economy. If we take a look at the three, you'll find that people are empowered and they are better organized and they can organize better. Okay. So it used to be that a country or the government of a country had to co-organize and lead to make production of steel in large amount. In China, a village can do it. This is an example. In 1975, in a small village located in Shazhou County, which is a location in Jiangsu province, the village collected investments as a collective for about 450,000 yuan to establish a small factory which produced crude steel. This factory later on became Sha Steel. They used the name Sha because Sha was the name of the location at that time. Is now a leading steel producer in the world. I provide you some numbers just for comparison. In 2019, for crude steel production, Germany as a country produced 39.7 million tons in a year, followed by Italy, France, and Spain. On top of it, Sha Steel produced 41.1 million tons of crude steel. As I said, our companies produce steel and they also trade steel. So this is a company, not a country. But its production size is comparable to a large country. You'll be more interested to find out that even though Sha Steel is a leading steel producer in the world, it's not the largest in China. This resembles the capacity building of the people, of the villages, of the organizations in China under the directives of the Chinese government, which is very powerful, which is impacting our economic foundation for the long term. So, takeaway 2. China's economic growth since 1978 is a result of industrialization combined with urbanization. It's not a coincidence. It is a return to the norm after re-entry to the world market. So, On one hand, it's a marvelous growth, which is labeled as miracle. On the other hand, it's just normal. It is rooted in a solid social economic foundation, which was set prior to 1978. Of course, the government policies, reforms, and opening up all took effect. It's not an easy job. We see a lot of challenges for the Chinese economy. Many challenges are urgent and pressing. For example, I'm going to go over with you a few. The structure of economy in China is not balanced. There are different interpretations of this, but for one look, you'll see that the Chinese people saved. So this generation, or the recent generations, have saved for contributing to the growth. For example, this is the saving as a country, which means that the gross economy, or the output that the economy produced, is spent on investment projects, fixed investments for future growth or future economic outputs. This is the government expenditure. And the net export is reduced to 2%. Even though we see export is very important for China, but as a percentage, it is minimum. This is also a reminder to see that if we want to maintain growth, we have to boost the consumption, domestic consumption. Finally, let's look at this number. Household consumption only takes up 39% of the GDP. One minus that is the saving, roughly speaking. The numbers were not still, okay, it's an evolution. It was as low as 34% in 2010. After that, the government had enacted policies to encourage, to lift the income of households and boost the consumption of households for longer-term sustainability. It was as high as 51% back in 1988 and 65.5% back in 1952. So this is an average, a normal range for household consumption percentage. Since then, the Chinese people have accumulated savings generations by generations to receive or to achieve what we have observed recently. So the Chinese economic growth is a miracle by contributions from generations of Chinese people. Of course, the government now sets a target to escalate this percentage. Financial stability is also a challenge. Of course, the financial system is very well developed in China from different measures and contributed to the success of its economy. However, it also accumulates pressures, especially asset pricing, the risk of asset pricing bubbles. For example, if we look at the money supply of the country, which amounts the currency and all deposits in financial institutions. In our general speaking, it's money available in the market. Back in 1990, if you divide money, M2, by GDP, the ratio was 0.8. The same ratio now is 2. This means we produced more money than the economy. Okay. So for this particular year, M2 is 199 trillion. GDP is 99.1. It could have long-term implications for financial risk. Of course, risk itself is also a source of opportunity. If we can handle this potential risk, if we can utilize the money supply, which is already in the financial system, we are going to add liquidity to the economy, capitals to the economy, without injecting new currency or other credits. So this is opportunity versus challenge issue. Environmental sustainability is always an issue. It is particularly an issue for China now because we are already the largest CO2 emission country back in 2009. We became the largest energy consumption country back in 2010. Another challenge is that if we consider energy consumption per GDP dollars, it is 3 times as of USA and 5 times of Japan. That means we use the energy in a less efficient way. Of course, China, the government and the population, the people, take care of the environmental issue seriously and have taken a lot of measures to reduce that. So last year alone, we increased efficiency of energy consumption by 2% a year alone. This is a pressing risk challenge to the country because environmental protection is a concern and the pollution should be gone away. However, if we look at it from another angle, it is also a source of opportunities. If we enhance the efficiency, for example, as we did last year, if we improve the efficiency, if we can meet the average of US, that means by the same consumption of energy, we can triple the economy, which is a very good picture. Now, take a look at the sector breakdown of GDP by countries. This is China. The industrial sector is 40% of GDP, while US here is only 20 or 19% for accurate. You'll find that from this observation, China is more industrialized than US. Or put another way, China is more heavily weighted by its industrial sector than the US. It has comes and flows. For example, from my understanding, the industry sector of the economy contributes to the backbone of the economy, while the service sector enriches the body of the economy. So both are important and are good. We have to improve both sectors. As China is improving, if we look at this ratio, it was as high as 60% years back. Now it's being reduced to 40.5%. This doesn't mean the industrial output was reduced. This means the other sectors were increased. So the agriculture was reduced. If we can reach a number similar to or close to the US, we can liberate more farm workers, labor in the rural area to industrial or service sectors, which pay higher. if we can liberate more industrial employment to the service, we can increase the personal income and the consumption, because service actually is balanced by consumption. Of course, US goes to the other end. Its industrial sector was higher before. Now it's shrunk to 19.1% and 80% for service. So the United States government is also doing efforts to balance this structure. If I summarize the new norm of China's economy, superior growth cannot be maintained for long term. So now is the time to transit from high growth to medium high growth. It was 9% or even higher. Now the target is 6%. We also need to improve the structure of the economy by boosting the service sector and the consumption. Actually, the service sector and the consumption are joint, because the service will be provided for consumption. Of course, you need to have consumption power to purchase and then maintain the service. The government also provides guidance and policies to support the diminution of the disparity between urban and rural areas, which is a systemic issue in China. And the government continues to lift all levels of society for income and for society development as a whole. We need to transition from inputs and investment-driven to innovation-driven economy. This is the new norm. I quote President Xi Jinping of China. He addressed the APEC CEO Summit on October 9, 2013. He said, if China is to make progress, it must deepen reform and opening up in all respects. So all the efforts are taken together as a country and as the government to make sure that our economic achievement can be maintained and sustainable. And the reforms are taking place all the time, which is difficult. If I summarize one of the features that this country has, from my understanding, China is unique because it doesn't encourage wealth to cluster around a few members or one level of its society. China instead tries to lift all members of its society to become a truly wealthy nation. Now comes to the last takeaway for today from my lecture. The socio-economic foundation gets stronger with the 40-year growth since 1978. It empowers China's economy to be robust and sustainable. Being open and having a willingness to reform is the path to continued success. And finally, not the least, innovation is the key. Innovation is the answer to many challenges, problems. Of course, today's topic is about post-pandemic economic growth or economic achievements. We'll find that the pandemic has affected the economy fundamentally. But from what I have shared with you, for China itself, the foundation was set way back prior to 1978. And it's getting stronger prior to the pandemic. It is going to work after or post the pandemic. I'll stop here for a while. Thank you.